Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. A little later, we're going to take a look at independent movie houses. Yes, they still exist in Colorado, but first, a little advance warning on what's coming in this session. That's right, they're back. It's the legislature. Grab your wallets, because that's what's going to happen. Joey Bunch from the Denver Post, good to see you.
Yeah, great to be here.
Megan Schrader from the Colorado Springs Gazette. Welcome.
Thanks.
How's Atticus,
Thanks.
your little boy?
He's great.
He's great. He's 13?
13 months.
It's time for number two.
He's doing good.
All right. So I thought this session was all going to revolve around one big thing, one big money grab, which was called the hospital provider fee. First of all, I'm going to let you try to explain the hospital provider fee, and we'll see how you do.
Well, you know, Ellen Roberts called it a scam the other day, and Brian Del Grosso has called this a shell game, because what the Democrats did in 2009 was created this fee that hospitals charge themselves, and it's a way to raise money to attract Medicaid money to the state so that you can serve, indigent people and then, people who just don't have enough insurance and the underserved. They didn't think it would run into the problems that it's created now because it's throwing us up over the Tabor cap. So they're hoping to move this hospital provider fee into an enterprise fund, which, as Megan found out yesterday, is the Republicans say is unconstitutional.
Well, forget that. The idea here was to get a way to get federal funds, matching federal funds for Medicaid. Right. And so we'll do this shell game. And I remember when it came in 2009, and we said, this is a tax. As a matter of fact, it was so poorly written, or sneakily written, I should say, that we're going to charge this tax on your hospital stay. We'll call it a fee, not a tax, and by law, we're not even allowed to put it on your hospital bill, so you schmucks in the hospital won't know you're paying more. The idea is we're going to get a bigger match. Now with Obamacare, we need that match more than ever. Right? Is that the plea?
Well, so we need the match more than ever because the costs of healthcare are continuing to rise, like they have always, and the number of people enrolling for Medicaid is increasing, and putting pressure on the budget. So we do need those federal matching funds. The money is passed through the state, get the matching fund, and goes back to Medicaid providers.
All right. So the way this fee works, and it's only called a fee in Colorado. Every other state calls it a hospital provider tax. The national laws call it a hospital provider tax. We take all this money from one account, we write a check to this other account, and then that check then goes back over here, basically. And because of that, it's enough for the feds to say, oh, you put it over here, here's it. It is a shell game, isn't it? Is that a fair way to put it?
Well,
don't ask a reporter that.
Haven't liked it right from the beginning, because they say it's just a way to pump up Medicaid and move us an inch further toward, or maybe more than an inch further toward socialized medicine, Medicaid for all. And I had lunch with a Republican the other day that said, you create a bigger piece of cheese, you're going to attract more mice, and that's what Democrats are trying to do.
You dine with Republicans?
All the time.
God, they have bad table manners. Bad table manners. All right, the question I keep asking, and this is the hypothetical, is in order to keep this from going over Tabor, they want to place it in what's called an enterprise. And if an enterprise is basically a pseudo business and it gets less than 10% of its money from the state, blah, 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 where's the enterprise? That is, if you're going to make CU an enterprise, I can point at the buildings. If you're going to make something else an enterprise, I can say, there it is. Here, what physical thing other than a checkbook is this enterprise?
I think that if you talk to Democrats who are supporting moving this money to an enterprise fund, they're going to say, look, hospitals they're enterprises, right? This fee is collected for their benefit. It goes directly back to them for their benefit. How much more of an enterprise could you get? Hospitals are businesses. They're running a business. I think Republicans are going to say, this is not the business, a state business. An enterprise fund is a state-run business. It's a Parks and Recreation, a state-run business. They collect fees for fishing licenses, hunting licenses, and then they operate off of those fees. They're providing a direct service. They're saying HCPF, the state's provider of health insurance network, is not in a business. It gets too much money from the state.
So it can't be. Yeah, this is going to be a tough one. All right, let's get to the gossipy part, because we have a split legislature. And the force is to try to keep what is going to be about up to what, $700 million, $750 million a year. Keep in mind that just a couple of years ago, the voters voted down a $1 billion a year tax increase. And so now this would be a $700 million a year tax increase, money they wouldn't get back, but there won't be a vote.
Well, they won't get back that much.
It's $212 million. At issue is $212 million that would go back to taxpayers in 16-17 fiscal year. So it's not a lot of money that we're talking about here. And the idea is if you take the $750 million hospital provider fee out, it's going to drop us below the cap. And really, it's going to take away TABOR refunds into the foreseeable future. And that's the plan. If the Democrats are saying, let us keep this $200 million and put it into transportation and education and higher education. And Republicans are saying, I think we can do refunds and still come up with a balanced budget.
So my worry on this was that with only one vote advantage for Republicans in the Senate, it takes one weak-kneed Republican to make this go, and that Republican could go any place unless, of course, the president of the Senate, Bill Cadman, puts it in the right place. Now, he's under a tremendous amount of pressure. I mean, and there were all sorts of whispers of there's going to be a deal here, and I think every Republican was offered everything they could possibly want. Let me ask you, since you did the story, is there going to be a deal? Is Bill Cadman going to break?
I think any prayer of a deal might have gone up in flames yesterday. So yesterday's Senate President Bill Cadman held a press conference and said, look, I was operating in good faith, entertaining the idea of this hospital provider fee fix until I got this memo. He unveils this jumbo-sized memo and says, nonpartisan legal counsel staff said a year ago that this was unconstitutional, and I've just now uncovered this document. Who had this before, who knew before, and why are we just now finding out that people are saying this is completely an undoable non-starter? The Democrats responded with, that's been in the public sphere, that document, and we don't agree
really
with
what this is Bill Cadman, the president of the Senate, saying it's not going to happen. So the big question, everyone was waiting on bated breath. From my point of view, will Bill do the right thing? And he's a good guy, but I can't imagine the amount of pressure he was under and how many deals were floated for him. And at this point, the gauntlet's down. He says nay.
The first lesson of politics is math. You got to count your votes. And Bill was never going to get. He's got 8 staunch Republicans that were just never going to go for that deal. And the deal was too big right from the start. What I've heard for the past since the last session ended was there would be a deal for this $3.5 billion bond issue that the Republicans want for this hospital provider fee. And now we're back to the point where the Republicans still want the $3.5 billion bond issue that Democrats aren't going to give them, and Democrats want the hospital provider fee reclassification that Republicans aren't going to give them. Dickie Lee Hullinghorst, the House Speaker, was asked at the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce breakfast the other day that, what's going to be different this year? You tried the hospital provider fee and it didn't work, and what are you going to do different this year? And, we're less than a week away from the session, a little more than a week at that time, and she says, well, I don't know yet, but we're working on that. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're looking at gridlock this year as far as these big issues. They'll pass a budget, they'll pass some things, but it's an election year. It's a closely, we're a purple state, but we're a very purple legislature. It doesn't take many votes to block or pass to get in the way of things. And Bill was just never going to get those votes he needed in the Senate. Anybody who knows the Senate could have predicted this months ago.
But I can't, Bill's a tough guy, but I can't imagine every place he goes, because there isn't like a whole big taxpayers group out there that you go in front of. You go to all the takings coalitions. There's a case in the school boards and the schools, and then the roads guys and this guy. Everybody wants something, so the whole world, in his view, is going to be going, we need this money, and he's staying firm. Does this change? Do you see this going? What's your crystal ball say?
I think that this is going to be the compromise. The governor has proposed kind of a middle road in his budget, which is we're not going to make it an enterprise fund, but we're just going to collect $100 million less of the hospital provider fee, which will mean less revenue for the state, which will mean we're $100 million lower than the cap. So there will be refunds, less refunds though, and $100 million more for lawmakers to play with for other things. I think that middle road might have the ability to get through. It's got to get through the JBC, the Joint Budget Committee, is where that middle road might come through.
All right, the problem I see here is there's still no vote of the people, you know, and I could see the compromise being, well, we'll ask the people. Heaven forbid. You know, what this does is it takes away refunds and doesn't ask people if that's okay. You know, this is a kind of Ref C moment all over again, 11 years later. That should we monkey with the limits of taper so that government can keep more? The difference is, as awful as Ref C was, in my opinion, at least they asked the people. I don't see that happening yet.
Well, there's going to be a vote of the people next November. And what's going on right now is already writing the campaign ads. Brian Del Grosso said at the same Denver Metro Chamber breakfast that the voters are going to see this as a shell game with their money. It doesn't matter. Now, Brian didn't say this, but it doesn't matter to some people whether it's $1 or $100 or $150. They see it as their money. And if you're opposed to growing the size of government, you're against that. And if you think that investing in government, investing in schools, investing in roads, if you're willing to buy the sales pitch, then you think that's a good investment of money.
Yeah, of course, there's always this third way that we never talk about, which is finding savings in the government. We are the last state in the frickin' union to have an old age pension fund. All the other states got rid of theirs with the advent of Social Security. Do we want to get rid of that? Heaven forbid we touch that, because it will anger a takings group, and therefore we can't do that. There are so many things we could do, but it's easier to get more money. All right, we only have a half a minute left here. So tell me, other than this, do you see a big issue brewing in the state legislature for the next 3 months?
I think we've touched on it briefly, but construction defects, I think, are going to be a big issue. Republicans are going to try and get Democrats to support a bill that would make it more difficult to sue a home builder for perceived defects in constructions.
And all the other bills that usually come up, but probably won't go too far, being an election year and a split legislature. Oh, but the fighting's fun. Yeah,
the gun bills, reproductive rights. I think we're going to see a lot of those bills because, you know, like Cadman said, you know, some days you make a difference and some days you make a point. And I think we're going to see a lot of points made during this session.
Joey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about theaters. You're going to like this one.